Hello, this is Joe from Nerd in Korea. We're starting our Budget Interesting Commander 6. We're already on to number 6. We're looking at blue color identity this time, so we'll get into it here. What is this series about? Okay, these videos are meant to give ideas for good budget commanders that are available, okay? So this is really kind of like for brainstorming, I think more. I do prioritize little known commanders, but in the number 5 spot, I will often put a better known one. This series is for people new to the format as well, right? So this isn't just for people who are really into Commander and know kind of the ins and outs. This is also for people who are maybe somewhat new to it. New to Magic or new to Commander, alright? This video features commanders with the blue color identity, not necessarily mono blue, right? This is blue color identity, not mono blue. There is at least one mono blue one, but yeah, I think there's a lot of Simic, but anyway. Alright. Okay, budget can mean a lot of different things, so what do I mean by budget? I mean $2 or less, and I am using the TCG player market value as always, okay? They are not a sponsor, is something I am supposed to say. Also, yeah, we're looking at the commanders and some ideas for the 99. Again, this is more like to give you ideas for the options that you can build off of the commander. It's not like, yeah, anyway. Corrections. Okay, in my last video I made a couple of mistakes. It was nice to, I think it's kind of helpful to go over things like that, so I'm going to do that. Descend is a cast trigger and would not work with Wart's copy ability. So in my last video I had Wart, the Raid Mother, who has Conspire. She can copy red and green instants and sorceries. I had one, I believe it's a sorcery with a Descend, which is useful, but yeah, the Descend trigger does not go off for the copies, right? Copies do not get Descend, basically. So yeah. That's, Steve Me pointed that out. Thank you, Steve Me. And channel effects can be countered, but only by effects that counter triggered abilities, which Urtai does have. And thank you, Tim Ice, for pointing that one out. He makes the channel MTG on a budget, so if you want more ideas, check that out. He's very thorough. I like his videos because he's got like a real, he pays attention to the details a lot. He probably wouldn't make these mistakes anyway. Yeah, channel, a lot of people often refer to channel as can't be countered. I think I have even seen that on a Command Zone video where, yeah, I believe it was Jimmy used a channel ability and he said, oh, it can't be countered. That's kind of true. Again, you can't counter it with counter spell. So it's maybe an oversimplification that I took a little too literally. But yeah, in my mind I was thinking it goes from hand to graveyard, so maybe that the channel skips by. Of course it still enters the stack and everything. I don't know why I thought that, but anyway, yeah. Channel can be countered as long as you can counter the triggered ability. Like Urtai, yeah. So that commander can. Number 5. Okay, remember, this is the well-known one. Don't get angry. Don't get angry. Anyway, Baral, Chief of Compliance. So for 1 and a blue, instants and sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast, and whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Okay, so he's got cost reduction and card draw, well, rummaging maybe you might call it, off of countering abilities. So yeah, he's all about counter spells. All right, he's probably the most blue commander you can get. That's the one reason I have him on here. Also, he's at 190 right now. That's going up. Okay, he was actually lower a few months ago, and it seems like his price is trending up, trending up, trending up. I think more decent counterspells have been coming out. Like Outlaws of Thunder Junction had some decent ones, so yeah. anytime there's new interesting counter spells coming out, or counter abilities, whatever it may be, I think he's going to get a bump. So he's at 190 right now. I don't know if he's going to stay budget that long. Basically, if you are interested in getting him, get him soon. Anywho, alright. So, yeah, there's a lot of ways you can actually build this one. These are 3 very good options. You might not want all 3 in a deck, though. Urtai's Scorn. First of all, this spell costs 1 blue less to cast if an opponent casts 2 or more spells this turn. So this spell has cost reduction built into it, which is awesome. But it's a counter spell that is for a 1 and 2 blue, so it's more expensive than counter spell unless they've cast more than 1 spell. Especially when you're getting to mid to late game, when the counter spells really matter and you probably have more mana for counter spells, this does a lot more work. Also, remember, he makes Baral has cost reduction, so you can cast this counter spell for 1 blue. If they cast 1 spell already, it's their second spell, you're looking at a 1 blue counter spell. That's very, very good, and only 20 cents. Cheaper than counterspell, probably because the cost on the card is actually more expensive. The CMC is higher than counterspell, but anyway. And Vodalian Mage. I actually have a couple of these from the 90s, so I always like to be able to put them on a list. And they have the old tap symbol, which is kind of like a, not quite sideways T, but a turned over T. Counter target spell, caster of target spell does not pay an additional 1. You might say, well, that's not great. It's not meant to count. Really, I would not be using this to counter like spells people are casting on their turn. It's much better for like shutting down other people's counter spells, right? Usually you hold up like 2 blue and then you cast the counter spell. So if you use this on the counter spell, they're probably tapped out. They're probably not going to have that 1 extra, and if they can't, you're going to draw a card and discard a card. So yeah, very good for that. Also, only 1 blue to counter a spell is amazing, but anyway. Case of the Ransack Lab. Instant sorcery spells cost you 1 less to cast. Okay, this is stacking that cost reduction. So yeah. -2 for instants and sorceries, that's getting real good. To solve, you've cast 4 or more instants or sorcery spells this turn. Again, if you want to solve it, you should probably make sure that you're doing like a spell slinger or something, but yeah. If unsolved, solve at the beginning of your end step. Okay, cool. And when it's solved, whenever you cast an instance or sorcery card or spell, draw a card. Right? So this is card draw on top of your card draw and discard. Every time you counter a spell, if you're using some kind of counter spell, you're going to be drawing 2, discarding 1. That gets real. The advantage there is very extreme. Anyway, that is 82 cents. I really like these enchantment case things. I think there's a lot of good ones. They're underrated. Number 4. Bonnie Paul Clear Cutter. Again, this is a recent one. Someone got real upset about having recent ones on the list. The reasons why there's a lot of recent ones, they are designing things more and more for Commander. So yeah, it's kind of hard to not have recent ones when, well, products are coming out much more quickly these days, and I think, yeah, they are designed more and more with Commander in mind. So anyway, when she enters the battlefield, create Bow, right? A legendary blue ox. Creature token with this creature has power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. Whenever you attack, draw, and then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Excuse me. So yeah, this is all about getting ramp. Simic loves ramp, right? And when I say Simic, I mean green-blue. Every time you attack, not every time she attacks or she does combat damage, every time you attack, right? You can attack with a 1/1 token and just like basically sacrifice it. You don't care what happens. What you're really wanting is to just declare an attack, and you can draw a card and put a land down. Every turn, you're basically able to put 2 lands down and draw an extra card. That adds up very, very quickly. Yeah. She does love landfall triggers, and yeah, that is something to keep in mind. Anyway, 45 cents. Excuse me. Oh. Broken Bond. Okay, this actually featured on a targeted removal, so it's kind of nice to get into a video. But anyway, another video I should say. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Again, with targeted removal, if your targeted removal can't deal with artifacts or enchantments, it's pretty low on the list for me, at least. Like, creature removal is always good, but remember, you can do damage, you can have combat, there's a lot of different ways to get rid of creatures. I think with your targeted removal, you should focus on the things that combat can't deal with, damage can't deal with. Anyway, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Alright, that's actually an amazing ability. The downside there, sorcery, right? It's a sorcery. If this was an instant, this would probably be like a $10 card, but anyway. Dance of the Tumbleweeds. From the Outlaws of Thunder Junction here, it has Spree. I really like the Spree mechanic as well. So add 1 mana to the to the casting cost. Search your library for a basic land or desert card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Okay, so it can be a desert, but it doesn't have to be. You can just do a basic land. This is a really great ramp card, I think. And create an XX green elemental creature token where X is the number of lands you control. You can kind of double down on, if you're doing more of a token strategy, you can kind of double down on her having a bow, and this is almost like having 2 copies of the same token creature, so that can be very good. Anyway, that's 15 cents. And we got Kellen, Inquisitive Prodigy. This is nice because it's an adventure. So for a green and a blue, investigate. That means you create a clue token. You may play an additional land this turn. Again, more ways to play lands. If you're looking at this, you're probably wanting to have more card draw as well. But anyway, whenever Kellen Inquisitive Prodigy attacks, destroy up to 1 target artifact. If you controlled that permanent, draw a card. That's really great too, because if you're doing something like making clue tokens is just 3 and then tap and sacrifice it to draw a card. So this lets you activate the clue token without paying the mana cost, basically, right? Or any other artifact you happen to have. If you need cards, this might be, this might save your butt. Anyway, 49 cents. Number 3. Arwen Undomil. I feel like I'm not saying it right, but anyway. Whenever you scry, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. That's okay. It's not great, Scry effects are not hard to find and they're not hard to activate, so they're also very, very powerful. I think people underestimate how amazing scry is, being able to make sure. Like red would have you draw the cards and then discard. And that's a lot worse than just putting on the bottom of your library and just not bothering to draw the card in the first place. It's really more than just an upgraded version of rummaging. It's going to you can almost always make sure that you have a card you actually want to have in your hand when the turn is coming up, right? Or for the next turn. And the real hidden strength is that you can hold up a lot of mana without fear of just losing it outright. So if you're using a lot of counters and things like that, I think one of the major concerns people have is oh, if I leave this mana untapped, I'm just going to end up wasting it if I don't cast these counter spells. And you end up in the situation where you're do I want to maybe waste this counterspell or waste the mana? It's kind of like you end up with two bad options. Here, just keep the counterspell. You do have to pay 6. That's a lot. 6 to scry 2. You do get to put a +1/+1 on a creature. Still not great, right? It's really about just not wasting the mana. It's not about like this being a fantastic option. It's an option. An option is better than no option. That's really what I think this is about. Anyway, she's a whole 9 cents. So, looking at her stuff, Mystic Snake. It is 1, a green, a blue, and a blue. It has flash, and when it enters the battlefield, counter target spell. Alright, so you might think this is just really expensive compared to counterspell. Remember, first of all, this is a creature too. It's a 2/2, which isn't great. I wish it had like Death Touch or something. I mean, it's a snake, but also, if you have some way to flash, right? Blue has plenty of ways to flash things. So yeah, you can have this on the battlefield, flash it, or flicker it. I mean, not flash, flicker, right? Flicker it, and as soon as it re-enters the battlefield, you're countering a spell again. So this can actually be a lot of counter spells. Anyway, 87 cents. Elron, Master of Healing. Her and her dad, I guess. But anyway. Whenever you scry, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to X target creatures where X is the number of cards looked at while scrying this way. In some ways, this is like a better version of her ability. But again, having that extra mana sink where you can put the 6 mana into something, that's what I think is more valuable. Anyway, you can put +1/+1 counters. You can kind of double putting their +1/+1 counters thing. So yeah, you can get a lot of value out of that very quickly. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. So this is going to be scry. You can do a lot of scrying and then card draw as well. He does not have a scry effect on him. I think that's maybe one thing where you might go, little bit wish it had that, but anyway. And yeah, +1/+1 counters to matter, very good with her, right? A lot of synergy there. And finally, Rishkar, the Pima Renegade. I've never said that name out loud before. That's a weird name. Anyway, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 2 target creatures, so that's nice. Each creature you control with a +1 with a counter on it has add green. Again, any counter, not +1/+1 counter. I tried to add more restrictions. I always do that in my head. So you can basically make anything into a mana door with this guy. So once again, if you're able to just keep putting +1/+1 counters on anything you want, make token creatures, scry, drop those +1/+1 counters on them, and then use them for mana. It's really not that hard, especially with elves. Elves and tokens and ramp all just love each other, right? Anyway, 25 cents. Number 2. Izuri Claw of Progress. Okay, Izuri, I actually had a different Izuri as my kind of number 1 pick, I think 2 videos ago, but anyway. Whenever a creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you get an experience counter. I think experience counter is a very interesting mechanic. I would like to build a deck with it. I feel like you'd have to build a Wooburg to really get the value out of it, but anyway. At the beginning of combat on your turn, I do love this trigger. Okay, I should finish reading it. Put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, where X is the number of experience counters you have. Again, making 1/1 token creatures or 2/2 token creatures, super easy, right? You're just going to be able to like pile up the experience counters, and then at the beginning of combat, so they have very little time, right, to respond to this. Also, it protects them from sorceries, right? If your creature with a pile of +1/+1 counters on it gets those +1/+1 counters during, right before, as you're going into combat, that's outside of the main phase. So basically, it's almost like temporary protection from sorcery for whatever thing you decide to make really big. Anyway, yeah, I would focus on token generators and unblockable creatures, right? So here we go. That is, again, 50 cents. Okay, this one is one where I'm still like, I don't understand why this isn't more valuable. Anyway. Creatures with power less than Champion of Lamholt's power can't block creatures you control. Again, you put all those +1/+1 counters on her, and boom, basically all of your creatures become unblockable. Oh my. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Lamholt. Also, if you're making those token creatures, you're getting all of those experience counters, and she's just going to pile up all these +1/+1 counters herself, right? Most things on the board are going to be 6/6 or less, right? 6/6 is on the high end. So if you make 5 creatures while she's on the board, you're probably just unblockable. Like, everything you have is unblockable. It's crazy. But anyway, 60 cents. Why is it 60 cents? When this first came out, this is one of those cards where I said, oh, that's going to be like 10 bucks. Nope. Okay, sure. Simic Ascendancy. This is the cheapest card on the list. I think if someone busted this out in a game, I would be a little miffed about it. So if you are going to use it, but like, be aware that people might not appreciate that. Anyway, whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy. Again, you put all the +1/+1 counters on the creature, and it gets all these growth counters. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Simic Ascendancy has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game. Winning the game in like 1 or 2 turns, really not that hard. Excuse me. With especially if you have Azuri and Champion of Lamholt, you need to make like what, 9 more creatures or something like that, and then or 9 1/1s or 2 2s or some mix of those, and then you basically win the game at the beginning of the next turn. Crazy win con. Anyway, 134. Mutational Advantage. Alright. Permanents you control with counters on them gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Prevent all damage that will be dealt to those permanents this turn. Proliferate. Did it need to have Proliferate as well? Probably not. Again, I look at this card and I think, why is this only $1.31, right? Even if it didn't have Proliferate on it, it would be pretty damn good. Add the Proliferate. That's getting nuts. Okay, anyway. Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of extra things that I would put on here, so I kind of just stacked them all in there. Simic Manipulator. This lets you put a bunch of +1/+1 counters on it, and then you can tap and remove the +1/+1 counters to just steal people's creatures. So you could just be like nabbing commanders and stuff. So you can turn this into a deck that's just stealing everything pretty easily. Elusive Otter. Again, you can put lots of +1/+1 counters down, first of all. And it's an otter. I mean, come on. Yeah. And creatures with power less than elusive otters can't block it, right? So if you give this all of those +1/+1 counters, probably unblockable. Unless they've got also +1/+1 counters, or like an equipment deck where they're making that a Voltron kind of really huge creature, probably unblockable, right? Chasm Skulker. I feel like I should use this card a lot more. I always mean to put it in, and I forget, I think. But anyway, whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Chasm Skulker. When it dies, create X11 blue squid tokens with Island Walk. X is number equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on it. Again, with this, you can put all those +1/+1 counters on it, and if it gets killed, great. If this is board wipe, great, right? As soon as it dies, it's responding by making just a pile of squid tokens with Island Walk. All of the squid tokens are also going to trigger Azuri's ability, so if you manage to keep Azuri on the battlefield, he's just getting a whole pile of experience. Like, you can double your experience counters, basically. Anywho, an iridescent horn beetle. At the beginning of your end step, create a 1/1 green insect token for each +1/+1 counter you put on creatures this turn. He's just putting piles of +1/+1 counters on creatures. You might as well get the extra value and just like make a whole bunch of token creatures while you're at it, right? Again, creating those token creatures triggers his ability that makes the experience counters, that makes the +1/+1 counters. So you're doing that doubling thing. It's almost like a Cranko doubling thing every turn. Number 1. Oh, please hit like and subscribe. It really does help a lot. Tonos the Toy Maker. I could see people not being really into this, but I think it's a real gem. Anyway, flexible Kindred Commander. Birds in particular are underrated. I've been going through all kinds of like different Kindred things for the Kindred series, and birds I keep going like, oh, what? Remember, almost all birds have flying, so like the evasion is like built in. Unsurprisingly, birds fly, but anyway, their ETBs can be very good as well. Great at creating artifact creature tokens. Focus on his token creation and ETBs. Again, he automatically makes a token copy of any bird or beast that you cast, right? So that is nice, I think, because it is not really like one fixed kind of kindred. You can do it two different ways, or make use of both if you really want to, right? I probably wouldn't go all birds or all beasts if he was my commander. Anywho. So Radagast, Wizard of the Wild. First of all, love Radagast. Ward 1, beasts and birds you control have Ward 1. Okay, a lot of people complain about Ward, and Ward is flawed, I fully admit, but it's better than nothing, right? It does absolutely nothing versus a board wipe, but any kind of targeted removal or anything like that, targeted effect, paying 1 extra adds up very quickly when all of your creatures have it. Whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, choose one, make a 3/3 beast or a 2/2 bird. Which again, your commander is automatically going to double, right? So you can make 2 tokens for casting anything that's 5 or higher. I think using that kind of synergy there can be extremely worthwhile. Next up, oh, my throat is getting all dry. I feel like it's hard to even scratch the surface of the birds, but I'm starting with this one just because it is kind of good with this commander. Again, flying, because it's a bird. Creatures with flying you cast cost 1 less to cast. Again, you cast this, he automatically makes a copy. So that means all of your flying stuff costs 2 less to cast. Very quickly, the value engine on that gets out of control. Anyway, 18 cents for that one. Manglehorn enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact. Target removal on top of like just any creature, I think it's great. It's a 2/2, that's not crazy good, but it costs 2 and a green, right? The CMC compared to like the effect and having the creature, I think is fully worth it. Already it's worth it. We got one more thing. Artifacts your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. all of those mana rocks they're busting out, those come in tapped, right? It slows down their value engines so much. Artifact creatures aren't able to, if they have haste, it doesn't matter. All kinds of kind of benefits that maybe you count differently, but in summation are amazing. Anyway, that is 105 for that one. Alright, on to the list. Baral, Chief of Compliance, 190. Again, very well known, I know. Remember, this is for everybody. Bonnie Paul, Clear Cutter is 45 cents. The Land Ramp you can get at her is crazy. Arwen Undomil, 9 cents. Yeah, even I do really like that you can hold up mana and put it into something. I think the value on that is very underestimated. So anyway, Azuri Claw Progress is 50 cents. So easy to build up experience counters, especially I wish I could find more experience counters creatures that are in Simic. There are other creatures, of course, just not as many in Simic. But anyway, 50 cents. Tonos the Toy Maker, 166. Again, just plan around ETBs and he gets crazy. Okay, alright. Take it easy.